Welcome everyone to the August meeting of the Australian Zonta Says Now think tank. My name is Carol Theobald and I'm speaking to you today from the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people in Western Australia. I'll be hosting today's meeting with the help of Sue Lee, Sandra Burns in Victoria, Bridget Mather, Chair of Zonta Australia based in South Australia, and Christine Trenorden based between South Australia and Queensland. The theme of today's meeting is the power of purposeful collaboration. And I think the picture sort of says it all. Before we begin, I'd like to cover some housekeeping. Please say hi in the chat and tell us where you're calling from today. Please use the chat line to make comments. Keep your microphone on mute, ask short, succinct questions, and use welcoming and inclusive language. I just reiterate, when we go into breakout rooms later, discussion in the breakout rooms is not recorded, but we do record the summaries from the facilitators at the end. Thank you. This is our program for today, so I'll hand over to Sandra in Melbourne to start with our welcome and introduction.
Thanks, Carol, and I'm on the land of the Wurundjeri people in Naarm in Melbourne. Firstly, we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in all the places we meet from today. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We usually acknowledge a female First Nations leader at the start of each meeting. Today, we acknowledge Dr. Karina Rung, an industrial chemist from Queensland. She is the 2025 Young Australian of the Year, and when I saw her award earlier this year, Carol, I was so pleased that we're acknowledging her today for her fantastic work. This 4-minute video shows how she epitomises what we're trying to achieve with Zonta Says Now. She is a scientist finding solutions to help the planet and her community.
My culture plays a very important role in what I do. Everything I do, I try and make it as green as possible. So that's minimising chemical reagents, trying to use reusable materials and create processes that are green intentionally, instead of just doing it the way everyone else has done it. So my discovery came about during my PhD research. I figured out a low-temperature way to turn mining byproducts into the main ingredient in laundry detergent.
To understand Katrina's discovery, you really need to think about the washing powders that we have at the moment. So when washing powders work, they come in and they interact with the dirt and grime in our clothes and they encapsulate it and they take that dirt and grime away into our wastewater. What Katrina's discovered is that she can treat minerals to form a porous material where a chemical reaction can occur, basically breaking it all down completely. So it's much more eco-friendly because you don't have anything that's going into wastewater. It's something that you can use over and over and over again. And even when it's coming to its end of life, you can actually regenerate it.
So one of the things that I hope that my company will be able to assist the community with is combating rheumatic heart disease, which is caused by a bacteria, strep. Strep is highly contagious, and one of the ways you can prevent strep is by having access to laundry facilities. In Australia, rheumatic heart disease affects predominantly Indigenous people in remote communities. A lot of remote communities don't have access to laundry facilities. Because of the remoteness, the cost of living is actually a lot higher. Laundry detergent is prohibitively expensive. I thought of this idea for a business, that I could make a reusable laundry system, the first of its kind in Australia, that reduces the reliance on shipping out detergents.
I think that one of the things about Katrina is that she's able to see not just the scientific value in it, but she can see the value to society. And to be able to have that wide view is something that doesn't come together very often.
When I speak to young people, our future scientists, I really try to nail home that you can be anyone and be a scientist.
As an ambassador at Deadly Science, Katrina does a lot of really great things for our organisation. She often volunteers her time to talk to school kids in remote communities. She does Deadly Learner sessions with our kids. She does in-person workshops.
These students already are scientists. Their traditional knowledge informs their practice. It's really, really, really special to be able to bring my passion for science and chemistry in with my connection to country.
I wish that I had people like Katrina when I was younger, because those are the people that inspire the next generation. She's going to give us more scientists. She's going to give us more deadly young people doing great things because she's done it and she's created a path for them.
The world really is her oyster at the moment. She's got a scientific brain, and so she's got a great career in research, but she's also got this entrepreneurial streak. She could go in many different directions.
I'm really, really looking forward to the future. I'm optimistic and very excited to bring this to the next level.
Okay, I think you'll agree that she's quite an amazing Young Australian of the Year. Now, we have to get our brains into gear, and we'd like to do 2 quick polls. The first asks, what does purposeful collaboration mean to you? And you'll choose the answer that best fits your view. You only get one choice this time, and so just go with your gut there. A way to work with others to achieve shared goals, collaboration that aligns with our values and mission, partnerships designed to create a measurable impact, sharing resources and knowledge to solve complex problems, and not sure yet, I'm here to find out. So just choose the one that's most suitable for you. Just sharing the results. Okay, 32% partnerships designed to create measurable impact. 28% thought collaboration aligns with our values and missions. 24% it's a way to work with others to achieve shared goals. 12% sharing resources and knowledge to solve complex problems, and only 4% not sure yet, I'm here to find out. But I think most people are there on board with sharing the values and shared goals, etc. Thank you. Now, are you ready for our second poll, Carol?
Yep, it's just coming.
Okay, our second poll asks, who would you most like to collaborate with to advance gender equal climate action? This time you can choose more than one answer if you want to. There are 7 choices. Would you like to collaborate with local environmental or sustainability groups, women's rights or gender equity organisations, schools or universities, local councils or government bodies, business or industry groups, other Zonta clubs, either local or global, not sure yet, open to all the ideas. So off you go. We finished now, Carol?
I'm just sharing the results.
Okay. Yep. Okay. We can see them. So what did this reveal? Well, just a quick look. 76% said they'd like to have purposeful collaboration with women's rights or gender equity organisations. 60% were looking at local environmental or sustainability groups. 48% local council and governments. 28% schools and universities, closely followed by 24% business or industry groups, but still 40% who thought that, other Zonta clubs. So there was nobody then, I think, who said not sure yet. So
two.
2 was there. I can't see that on the bottom there. So yeah, no, that's okay. So basically, quite a high percentage to deal with women's groups and local environmental groups. Thank you, Carol. And so I hope that gives some feedback for some people. I'm now going to hand over to Bridget Mather to introduce our guest speaker.
Thanks, Sandra. Today it is really my great pleasure to welcome our guest speaker, Fiona Dorman, who is currently the President of the National Council of Australia. Fiona brings a powerful blend of scientific insight, grassroots advocacy, and national and international leadership. Her professional background includes research in haematology, stem cells, and oncology drug development, but her passion lies in empowering women and giving voice to community-driven change. As President of the National Council of Women, Fiona recently represented Australia at the International Council of Women Global Convention in Marrakesh. She's also played a key role in Australia's 2024 delegation to the W20 and is off to Johannesburg later this year for a similar delegation, and works with the G20 official engagement group focused on gender equality. She also works with international partners to ensure the needs and rights of women and girls are embedded in G20 policy and commitments. Fiona is a co-founder of the Australian Women's Fund, South Australian Women's Fund, chair of the Premier's Council for Women, and a long-time advocate for using collaboration, evidence and community engagement to drive social reform. What's not on my written notes here, but I know that Fiona is also a board member at Channel 44 Community Radio, so dial into that when you can. And it's also a member of the Power Community Limited, which is really about respectful relationships with the Port Power, her favourite football club. So Fiona believes when we work together, we can create real lasting impact, and she brings that spirit to every role she holds. Please warmly welcome Fiona. Over to you, Fiona.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. Now, I'm going to see technology, despite having a science degree, technology isn't always my friend. So I'm going to put us onto, I'm hoping you will see my screen here. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to minimize us in the background as well. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. Good afternoon, everybody. My Zonta International sisters and friends, colleagues, advocates, activists, thank you so much for having me. It's truly humbling to be invited to speak with you today. And a particular thank you to Carol and Bridget for the invitation to speak, and for everybody online today giving up your afternoon, but for a really important topic. It is my honour to speak this afternoon and be part of these really important discussions. May I also acknowledge that we are all meeting on the traditional country of First Nations, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and may I acknowledge their ongoing and deep connection to country. I acknowledge the ongoing importance of First Nations culture and First Nations peoples as the first scientists of this land, and the wisdom gained over millennia and shared with us. When we're thinking about climate here today, I also recognise that First Nations peoples, their deep understanding of the air, land and waters, and the generosity of First Nations brothers and sisters to share this knowledge with us. It is a privilege to join you today for the Zonta Says Now think tank, a space where we're going to turn ideas into action and where we can bring our collective voice together on some of the most pressing issues of our time. And today we're thinking about climate. Today I want to take you on a journey that connects three big ideas: the urgency of the climate crisis and why it is inseparable from gender equality, the power of women's voices influencing policy locally, nationally, and on a global stage, and the role each of us can play in accelerating equality. Not in 100 years, I really don't like that statistic anymore. I think we can do better, but we want it in our lifetimes. Oops. I come to this conversation as this might be a bit out of, sorry, I'm just going to go that. Come to this conversation as a scientist and an advocate, someone who I might have started in laboratories. I worked on blood and stem cell research and oncology, drug development. But since that time, I found my passion for evidence and facts was just as valuable in public policy and grassroots advocacy. And I also come to you wearing several hats, as Bridget was kind enough to mention, that being part of the National Council of Women Australia as the president, past president of National Council South Australia. I have roles here in South Australia with as the chair of the Premier's Council for Women. So we're independent advisory body that provides advice on policies, programs, services to the Premier of South Australia and also to the Minister for women. And I will speak later about the South Australian Women's Fund. Through these roles, I've learned many things, and I've learned how women's voices can shape high-level policy and why collaboration and evidence-based advocacy are essential, especially if we're going to achieve climate targets. Women's voices are so important in this discussion, and I would hazard to say that we are not in the discussion as much as we should be right yet. And so let's work on changing this. And if we want to talk about equality, we have to start with climate change, because climate change is not just an environmental issue, it's a human rights issue, and it is a gendered issue. I want to begin with an urgent truth. This is not at all surprising to anyone on this meeting this afternoon. Climate change is not only about melting ice caps. It's not just about disappearing rainforests or endangered animals. It's not only a story of rising seas and falling biodiversity. It is a human crisis, and a deeply gendered one. In November 2023, CNN ran a powerful story called How the Climate Crisis Fuels Gender Inequality, and I will send this link as well. It is a confronting read. It described in stark detail how the impacts of climate change, droughts, floods, wildfires, are not felt equally. They disproportionately affect women and girls, especially in low-income and climate-vulnerable regions. Why? It's because climate change acts as a threat multiplier. It doesn't just bring new problems, it magnifies existing ones. It intensifies poverty, it deepens inequality, it increases the risk of violence and exploitation. The article highlighted in Nigeria as an example, worsening droughts and floods are making it impossible for girls to get to school. In Brazil, deforestation is destroying the livelihoods of women who process a particular type of coconut, thereby threatening both the family's income and also the health of the Amazon. In the Philippines, flooding leaves women and girls vulnerable to human trafficking. In Kenya, alternating droughts and floods mean food insecurity. It means displacement and an alarming rise in gender-based violence. The research is really clear, though, that every additional year of girls' schooling raises the country's climate disaster resilience, and this is a positive. That is the scale of the opportunity. But unfortunately, it's also the tragedy if we fail. Now, these examples might feel far away, but of course we know that Australia is not immune. We have our own climate realities, we have prolonged droughts, we have catastrophic bushfires, devastating floods. And now in my home state of South Australia, we have an emerging and deepening marine crisis threatening our coastal ecosystems. Climate consciousness is rising, but unfortunately, so too is climate denial. That's why we need advocacy that integrates climate justice into everything we do. It is why I believe that organisations like National Council of Women Australia, the International Council of Women, Zonta International, and those of all of our global sisters have such an important role to play. My own path into this work wasn't a straight line. In fact, I began nearly 20 years ago, nearly just on 20 years ago, not at an international summit, but at a grassroots meeting right here in South Australia. I joined the National Council of Women of South Australia as a delegate from an organisation called the Asian Women's Consultative Council. So we are a small but mighty grassroots organisation supporting the voices of Asian women in our state. That step connected me to a network that was not just local, but national and international. My background in science taught me discipline. It's taught me how to interrogate data, ask better questions, and to never accept the first easy answer. I've learned that science and advocacy share something really vital. Both require evidence, persistence, and collaboration. And those skills, for me, I've found to be really invaluable in policy discussions and advocacy. Over my time, my work's expanded from the labs into various advocacy and leadership roles. And through those roles, I've seen how women's leadership is essential for tackling interconnected challenges from climate change to economic participation and safety. The first National Council of Women connection also opened my eyes to the work of the International Council of Women. I call it, I'm not sure if we all do, but the mother organisation of our National Councils of Women globally. So that brings me to the organisation at the heart of my advocacy here in Australia, the National Council of Women of Australia. Here in Australia, NCWA has been working for over 125 years to promote equality and empower women. We're a national umbrella organisation with broadly humanitarian and educational mission. Our advocacy is driven by our structure, which is replicated internationally and across our national councils internationally, where we work under what we call standing committees. So much like parliamentary committees, but our standing committees, they cover, as an example, communication, wellbeing, which is where environment and habitat sit, social issues, status of women, and sustainable development. And I'm not sure... Our work is largely advocacy, looking at policy and legislation as opposed to service. So we don't generally, not in Australia, we don't generally run projects, but we lead our work in advocacy by gathering and collating the voices of all of our members across National Council of Women. Sorry, I must apologise. I'm doing terrible at clicking between all of my pages here. And climate and environmental advocacy, they're not just new for us. Since I've just had a bit of a look back into our last 25 years of what resolutions we've passed as a national body. Since 2000, we've passed a number of resolutions, and in many years reaffirming those resolutions. So we have looked at resolutions calling for nationally a national strategic water plan, sustainable land and water management, stronger renewable energy targets, reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, the protection of the Great Barrier Reef, and of course action on plastic waste and microplastics. And I believe now that our next chapter is really clear, and I must call out the work of Bridget Mather here as well, working with National Council of Women Australia to help us with our emerging focus in climate. But our next chapter, I think, really is clear. We need a shift. Environmental sustainability and climate action must become a lens for all of our advocacy. Climate impacts are interconnected. They're interconnected with housing, with health, with education, employment, and our advocacy really must reflect that reality. Of course, National Council of Women is part of something much bigger than ourselves. A global network that has been truly advocating for women for over a century, which is the International Council of Women, founded in 1888 in Washington, DC. And at the time, it brought together 53 women's organisations from 9 different countries, which really was an extraordinary feat for the time. Its founders included Susan B. Anthony, May Wright Sewell, and Frances Willard, women who understood that equality could not be achieved in isolation. And since its creation, ICW has worked with the League of Nations and later with the United Nations to make gender equality a universal norm. A lot of our work in the past and continuing now has tackled health, education, violence prevention, environmental protection, and sustainable development. It's always been apolitical, but never neutral on the rights of women and girls. And the way I like to say it here in Australia is, we don't care what your politics is as long as you listen to the women and listen to what we have to say on issues. Today, ICW has national councils in over 70 countries. Our current triennial theme, which we are just moving to transition, has been Women's Empowerment, Peace and Sustainable Development, which ties directly into the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Recently, in June in Marrakesh, in Morocco, ICW held its triennial General Assembly. With delegates from around the world, we gathered to set our priorities for the coming years as opportunity not only to just share strategies, but also to strengthen our collective voice in international forums. At this particular meeting, we worked on a number of advocacy initiatives and resolutions. Resolutions that included free and open access to education for girls worldwide, which we know is also impacted by climate climate change, combating all forms of harassment, advancing gender equality and eliminating gender-based violence, promoting equitable world peace with respect to cultural and religious differences, resolutions for women in diplomacy, and seeing women's roles as a weapon for peace, empowering women in the age of new technologies, the challenges and the opportunities. And most importantly for this discussion, our climate change resolution. This particular resolution was proposed by the National Council of Women in Great Britain and seconded by the National Council of Women in Canada and accepted by all national councils present at ICW. So in this particular resolution, it calls for action in climate change. So the resolution states that, of course, we are alarmed by accelerating climate change, rising greenhouse gas emissions, record-breaking global temperatures, and increasing harm to vulnerable populations. In the resolution, we've acknowledged the urgent warnings from the UNEP and the UN Secretary General that global heating may soon exceed the 1.5 degree limit. The resolution highlights the interconnected triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss and pollution, as well as the risks of crossing environmental tipping points, which could trigger irreversible global impacts. In the next part of our work, through the International Council of Women and our national councils of women globally, we will be stressing that climate change is a global challenge. Of course it is, requiring stronger international cooperation, improved governance of energy and land use, and reduced resource-intensive consumption. It notes the disproportionate suffering of women, children, and older people, and reiterates the need for targeted support to women, especially in developing countries, given their critical role in food and water resilience. So in our particular resolutions that we've just ratified in Morocco, the International Council of Women has called upon all of our national councils of women to lobby our governments to enhance and accelerate climate action to limit global warming, to document and share with ICW the impacts of climate change in our countries, with emphasis of the effects on women and girls, and to share best practices in prevention and mitigation measures. So this has firmly and will firmly become our work for the next 3 years and beyond. While these international and national networks are powerful, we also need practical on-the-ground solutions, and that's why the South Australian Women's Fund was created. So philanthropy is now, I guess, probably more so an emerging part of my work that I'm very lucky enough to be a part of. In 2018, the South Australian Women's Fund was co-founded. We're a philanthropic organisation that provide grants to projects that benefit women and girls in South Australia. And our approach is simple and we hope powerful. We back initiatives that create real and measurable change. So that might mean funding programs that build job skills, support services for women escaping violence, or improving women's health outcomes. In recent years, we've supported the Port Adelaide Football Club's Power Community Foundation for programs empowering girls into leadership. So last year, I think there was about 600 girls from across South Australia that went into the Power Community, it's called the Empowered Leadership Program. It is definitely a play on words of the Port Adelaide Football Club. Go the Power for all you Power supporters online today. But philanthropy really does have a power to seed innovation. It can bridge funding gaps, can also reach communities that are way too often overlooked. And when that philanthropy is designed by women, for women, it ensures that solutions are grounded in lived experience and that have an action and impact outcome. Now, the W20 and G20 engagement groups, this for me in recent years has been very new to me. So please forgive me if I'm going to tell you things that you already know, but I did want to almost start from the beginning, if that's okay. Of course, local solutions must be matched with global action, and that's where my work with the W or Women 20 comes in. This is truly globally facing through Women 20 or W20 as we call it. It's called an official engagement group of the G20. So W20 was established in 2015 to ensure that gender equality and women's economic empowerment are part of the G20 agenda, not just in speeches, but in policies and budgets and legislation. So the G20 meetings began as a result of the Asian financial crisis in around 2000, if my memory serves, 2001, as a way to ensure the financial security of the leading 20 nations. So at that time, it was billed as being meetings of the finance ministers of each of the G20, what became the G20 nations, where they worked out how to secure their finances so that if another financial crisis did not happen. Of course, then we had the global financial crisis that did come, of course. So there was, I hope, well, we assume lots of learnings. But since then, the G20 has expanded its considerations to include recommendations through communiques from what are called engagement groups. These recommendations link directly to Sustainable Development Goals, and they're strengthened by the fact that W20 doesn't work alone. It is one of many G20 engagement groups. So these engagement groups, to go back a little, sit alongside the G20, and we work completely outside the G20 and the government structure. So to get back to the G20 engagement groups, most people haven't heard of them. I hadn't until recent years, but they really play a pivotal role in shaping the G20 leaders' declarations that you will see when all the leaders get together and they talk about what new laws they will sign into act in their countries. So alongside the W20, there's also groups such as the B20, so for business, Civil 20, Labour and Trade Unions 20, which is L20, T20 for think tanks, Y20 for youth perspectives, U20 for urban policy, S20 for science, Startup 20 for entrepreneurship, P20 for parliamentary engagement, SAI 20 for audit institutions, that sounds like fun, O20 for oceans, and J20 for judiciary. Together, these voices, this brings voices together from every sector into the G20 decision-making and the G20 leaders' declaration. Many people won't know necessarily that these declarations do become law in the G20 nations. So National Council of Women have in recent years, since last year, have taken the lead as being what's called the head of delegation for Australia. And we believe at National Council of Women that through the W20 work, we are able to have the most influence on global policy and legislation. As Bridget mentioned earlier, in October last year, I was very fortunate to become part of the Australian delegation of the W20 at the W20 summit in Rio de Janeiro. And our recommendations to G20 leaders included, as an example, equal workforce participation and closing the global gender pay gap, support for women entrepreneurs, education and skills training, particularly in STEM, greater representation of women in leadership, universal access to healthcare, including reproductive and mental health, and closing the digital gender divide. The way forward. And this brings me back to the question that underpins today's sessions, or many of the questions that we'll have across today's session. How do we get to ensuring equality and equity? Where do we go from here? When we're thinking about climate, where do our voices sit? We need to ensure that women's voices are at every table where decisions are made. And this goes back to the foundations of National Council of Women. It goes back to the foundations of Zonta International. We need to make sure that women's voices are in government, they're in business, they're in science, they're in education, and they're in climate policy. We need to stop treating gender equality and climate action as separate issues. They're not. They are deeply intertwined. Equity and equality, as we know, it's not a pie where a bigger slice means a piece for some and less for others. It's really an engine where women thrive, economies grow, communities stabilise, and innovation accelerates. Research proves it. So, you don't have to listen to me. We can see it everywhere. Diverse leadership improves decision-making, fosters innovation, and strengthens our outcomes. So that's why your work at Zonta International and my work. I hope whether it's through NCWA, International Council of Women, collectively through the W20, it's about collaboration, evidence and purpose. The challenges before us, of course, they're complex, but so are we, and so is our strength. We're living in a time of intersecting crises, with whether it's climate, whether it's inequality, whether it's conflict, but also in a time, I think, of unprecedented possibility. Our interconnectedness means that we can be together today from all across Australia. We can be talking with our sisters across the globe, and working together and listening to each other, which I know Zonta does so well, collaborating with partners and with experts, leading with courage. I don't think we lack in leading with courage, so let's keep doing that. But acting together, I truly believe that nothing is beyond our reach. And my hope is that each of us leaves here today committed to ensuring that gender equality and climate justice walk hand in hand, for the sake of all of the women and girls that we know now, and for women and girls of the future. Thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate you listening.
Thank you very much, Fiona. We have time for a few questions. I think your comments, I think, sum up for me the fact that advocacy can be so much more powerful if we have a scientific framework, the rigor of science, and we aren't all lucky enough to have that. So thank you for that. Collaboration is just so important with partnerships. We don't get much done if we don't do that. But I do like your 3 dot points: evidence, persistence, and collaboration, that we need to look at them as a package deal. And I think I know that in Zonta we do that. We probably haven't talked about the scientific aspect as much, but I'm sure that Carol, in her deliberations with some of her colleagues, does talk about the science part of it. And so it's that rigor that I think is so important. So thank you very much. And I can see a couple of hands up. Faith?
Sorry, mine was a clapping hand, not a hand up. Sorry.
Well, we'll have a clapping hand as well. Do we have any questions? Because we are going to dive into then an opportunity to talk a little bit more about collaboration. Sue, I can see Sue, you've got, is it a clapping hand or a real hand?
Fiona, I'm just interested in where philanthropy comes from in Australia, because that seems to be something that we haven't really got sort of been able to do very well in Australia. So how have you done that?
That is such an excellent question, and I am learning so much about the philanthropy landscape in Australia at the moment. And of course, you know, when we're thinking about big philanthropy, the US does it very well, and I dare say across European nations as well. There is a huge philanthropy network in Australia, which is led by many different organisations, but Philanthropy Australia is certainly the, I guess, peak body for philanthropists in Australia. So I think it's a really enormous opportunity for us all in our organisations to connect with philanthropy, to talk about what we do and why it matters. I've become involved because a number of my colleagues who we co-founded the South Australian Women's Fund are very, very much in the philanthropy space nationally and with their own foundations. Interestingly, I see that we potentially haven't seen a strong connection with philanthropy, because the way the philanthropy structure works in Australia is largely connected to how they can gift, and the gifting of funds or distribution of funds happens through a very precise mechanism, which is that you must be a DGR 1 status charity to be able to receive philanthropic funds from these organisations. So not all of us as not-for-profit organisations, many of us incorporated associations, want to go down the track of becoming a deductible gift recipient status 1 charity, because it brings many things with it, and a lot of it is governance, and with governance comes cost. So I don't think, though, that precludes us from in fact, I still 100% believe it's an opportunity for us to become part of the conversations, so that people with philanthropic funds can hear what we think is important, because this is our grassroots, this is our everyday, this is our passion and drive. And I think there is an opportunity for us as organisations. I think maybe Zonta, you might be ahead of us at National Council in connecting with potentially community funds that have a status that can maybe auspice funds through their organisations through to our project work. So yeah, I think that's a discussion that that we can all have together, how we become part of the ecosystem to receive funds, where we can add capacity to our work and amplify our own impacts.
Thanks, Fiona. We do and we don't. We struggle with the DGR status from an ATO point of view, because a third of our funds raised go internationally, and that seems to bother the ATO a little bit.
Yes.
But some clubs have got around that. They have established their own foundations that sit beside their clubs, which is really quite an innovative way of achieving what they want to do. Could you quickly, I'm looking at the screen and I can't see anybody's hands up, and we will move into discussion, but can you quickly just talk about your work with the Premier's Advisory Council and the work that you might be doing in anticipation of COP and the Premier's Climate Change Council?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really excellent point. So the Premier's Council for Women in South Australia began, I'm going to say in 2000, because I've forgotten if it's 2002 or 2000, but it is nearly over 20 years ago, established under Premier Mike Rann, I believe, to, as I said, to provide independent advice to the Premier and the Minister for Women on policies, programs and services that affect women and girls in South Australia. You can tell I've practiced that. And you know, we do set our own agenda here in South Australia because we're independent advisors. We come together a number of times a year. We have a diverse group of women on that advisory board. We set our own agendas. At the moment, we are working on a number of pillars, which is including but not limited to women's leadership participation, economic participation and recognition, women's health, women's safety, and anything that else that comes across our desk at various times. So we're asked to comment on draft policy and legislation, to consult through to any number of government departments on anything that might be their policy or just something that is happening within their particular departments. But to your point about COP, we hope that COP will come to South Australia. There is an enormous amount of work being done through Premier and Cabinet and all number of different agencies here. Of course, Turkey is also still has their hand up for COP, and none of us are backing down right now. And I think rightly so. Australia is has a unique opportunity to host. It sounds like 30,000 plus delegates from across the globe to talk about climate change, particularly with the Premier's Council for Women. There is also there are in South Australia, I think 200 government boards with all various focuses and terms, but there is a Premier's Climate Council, and recently we have put to our Premier's Council for Women that there does need to be a deepening connection there. So we hope, we haven't met with them yet, but we do hope that in the short weeks and months to come that we will be able to, I think, share some of what we're talking about today is why climate and climate change is so important when we're thinking about gender equity and running a gender lens over climate policy. So we haven't quite done that yet, but we're hoping that will very much be on the agenda, and it simply must before must full stop, but also because of the lead up to COP that will hopefully be in South Australia next year, and I hope maybe we'll see lots of Zontians here for that and be able to put, of course, I have my National Council of Women hat on, but the National Council and Zonta hats firmly in these in the considerations.
Thanks, Fiona. Okay, you're staying with us now for the rest of the session, Fiona?
Yes, I hope so, if you have me.
No, perfectly. I just want to check. So we're now moving into discussion, and I'm handing over to you, Sue, to do that.
Thank you, Bridget. We'd like to seed the discussion with a couple of questions on this slide and the next. Then we'll put you into breakout rooms and give you 10 minutes to discuss the questions. So the first question is, can you think of a Zonta-based purposeful collaboration that worked well? Why did it work well or not? And the next question is, who could your club collaborate with locally or regionally to promote gender equal climate action? And would you need any tools to get started? So now we'll put you into breakout rooms, into 4 breakout rooms, I think. And then myself, Bridget, Christine, and Sandra will report back.
Okay, Sue, you're on mute.
All right, turned the wrong one on. This okay, so we're ready. So what are some of the key points from each group? Do you want me to start?
Yeah, may as well.
And then we'll go to the others. So from the group I was in, there was sort of fairly general expression that the service projects tend to help get other aspects of community involved, like the breast cushions, the birthing kits, and that's good. But Petra made the point that basically we're now trying to move a bit further out, and that's where Zonta Says Now comes in very strongly. So, like the E-clubs, looking at working with local schools, local environment groups to do tree planting. Gawler's been doing some terrific work with Rotary, Optimus, particularly with the 16 days of activism. Other groups are doing great stuff with football associations. Petra's and Gawler were talking about how they're working with their football associations to get Zonta more involved. Gawler's working with some private industry with the techno STEM area, and then also some are actually working with their TAFEs to get sort of respectful behaviour taken very seriously in the areas. So we are actually getting out there, but at the moment it's probably fairly ad hoc. So Zonta Says Now kind of brings it into a focus. So I think that's something that we think is useful. But yeah, so I think the summary is that yes, collaboration and working with other groups is important, and that there are areas that we can do that in for particular projects, and then there may be areas for actual associations together. So now I'll hand over to the other groups. So Bridget, Christine, and Sandra, who wants to talk first?
Okay, well, I'll go next then, if you like. In my group, everyone seemed to, in their clubs, they did have collaboration with certain organisations, some around service, but others around particularly DV or the 16 days of activism, and working with councils, working with their local community groups. White Ribbon, for instance, able to give quite a bit of support there. So, it's clubs that are in smaller areas, their collaboration, it seems, has been very good, much like what Sue was talking about. Faith was talking about a program in Perth that for my home, which was a collaboration between CWA, Rotary, Optimus. I think there were some others in there where they set up and provided for 18 units for women who were homeless over 50, and they're all as a group looking at what's going to be considered for the next project. So obviously quite successful. Trish spoke about how they involve in Newcastle and the Lake Macquarie area for DVD. The 16 days of activism, and really work quite closely with their council, which was the same Fiona was saying in Geelong, that with the 16 days of activism. They've worked with the local council, but there are quite a lot of groups who are coming together in Geelong so that they can share their ideas and maybe work together, or at least acknowledge and know what the others are working on. Perth Northern Suburbs Club, Dawn was saying, haven't really been into collaboration, but just recently sort of starting off looking at getting some support for mental health first aid programs and running forums and using politicians and local council in a program called Youth Guard. So, yeah, there was quite a lot of things going on, I felt, and people, I think, thought they were fairly successful at this stage, but we didn't really talk about any problems. Okay. So next, who would like to go next? We were room 3.
Christine or Bridget?
I'm happy to go next. Or
Yep.
where's Christine? I can't see her on my screen. We had 2 relatively new members of Zonta on our group, which was lovely to see that people who have just joined the organisation know about this group and are coming along. So that's great. Along with Lynn Foley, who is a elder of the clubs, and Fiona. And we were lucky enough to have Fiona in the group as well. We sort of focused on collaboration. We had a discussion about how well we currently do partnerships and collaboration around domestic violence, the crisis that women are in, and how we work with do service really well. We were talking about then that for advocacy around and work in the climate space, but Zonta says now, it is it's a different type of partnership and relationship that we have to form. And most clubs are still in that embryonic stage of who do we need to work with? Who are our key partners, allies, collaborators in the community, where we need to put our energy in establishing those networks. And it's not, I won't say it's not coming naturally yet, but it is, clubs need to put their minds to it, because there's always not a natural group to collaborate with around this particular issues. So that was a learning for us. And we talked about things that are working well, and they're little things like Judy Lovett talked about in South Australia. There's a sustainable fashion parade, and it is now got a following online about sustainable fashion, and it's got they have afternoon teas. Women come along, buy used clothes, they pre-loved clothes, and it is getting really quite a solid following, not just with Zonchans in South Australia, but with people just across the board as an important thing to do in terms of recycling. So that was a really powerful example of how we can do it. And there was probably a view that clubs will move from that embryonic stage, and it will be around those really practical things for the climate conversation. We didn't talk about it too much, but I think then the Zonta Australia has the opportunity to do the advocacy piece at the national level, which is where most of the policy settings sit anyway. So once we start to mature in this area, I think we'll have clubs who do the very practical and on the ground work in the community, and then we'll have the advocacy like we're planning to do at on the national stage as well. So, but it is still a journey.
Okay, Christine. We lost Christine.
On mute.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry about that. Yes, I would agree with Bridget's last statement, but we didn't discuss that in our group. What we did discuss was collaborations that had worked. A couple of examples were breast cushions and birthing kits. And I talked about collaboration in my club of Fleurieu Peninsula. Out of that, we pulled that what's important is shared values, shared commitment and enthusiasm. And a real key is the personnel, the right personnel. You know, there was an example given that where there was a collaboration that worked well but fell apart when a person left, and another example where collaboration seemed to be going okay up to a point, but things really moved along when personnel in one of the collaborating organisations changed for the better. So personnel and commitment, along with shared values, are really important. We talked about collaborating with other organisations and joining forces on national objectives. On the second question, we actually didn't get to spend a lot of time on this, but someone, Kay, did point out that being a member of an internet Zonta club makes it very difficult. So we do need to think about how to engage all Zonta members, or all Zonta clubs, rather, whether locally based or internet based. Cheryl talked about local governments at a national level. Now, Cheryl can correct me if I'm wrong, but all councils have committed to a gender equal disaster mitigation plan, but not all councils have followed up on this. So maybe that's something that Zonta clubs, or maybe Zonta Australia, could push for, advocate for. So that's about as far as we got. We didn't get to talk about the tools we need, but we talked about the need to keep advocating to the politicians at all levels of government.
Well, thank you. I think some really valuable discussion has come out of that. And I think it's shown us that we actually do collaboration. If we're talking about Zonta Says Now, it may be a slightly different type of collaboration, but we've actually got the skills amongst Zonta people to kind of try to move forward in that area. For example, in the area of 16 days of activism, obviously we're doing fantastic stuff. And we've got a lot of minds that know bits of things and have skills. I think that's one thing that always comes out of this discussion. It's just amazing how much each person has to offer. So, Christine, are there any other questions in the chat line?
There's one comment here. How many Zonta clubs have Zonta Says Now as a standard agenda item at their meetings? That would highlight the topic regularly and involve members. That's from Beppy.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so I'll now hand over to Carol to tell us what has been happening in the on the international level.
Great, thank you very much for that, Sue. How did you feel when you heard the news about the International Court of Justice's advisory opinion? Well, I've been on a high ever since. And for those of you who hadn't read it, read the two updates that we did, the international update and the Zonta Says Now Australia update. But basically, it was the largest case ever seen by the International Court of Justice, and the 15 judges unanimously agreed with the 140-page advisory opinion. Countries can be held legally responsible for their greenhouse gas emissions and the harms they cause the climate. Countries need to provide nationally determined contributions, that's their own climate targets, this year that are ambitious and aim to bring the planet back to a 1.5 degree goal. All countries were supposed to provide their targets by May, but less than 30 have done so. And Australia is one of those that hasn't submitted their NDCs yet, but they're discussing them now. But one other decision that was made by the International Court of Justice was that failing to regulate fossil fuel emissions, granting new extraction licenses, or providing fossil fuel subsidies may amount to an internationally wrongful act. And countries are responsible for climate harms, and human rights require climate action. Well, we've been telling them that for years, but there we go. So it was really good. But I encourage you to read the updates. They're on the website if you haven't already. The other news, the entries are now open for the International Virtual Art Gallery. We feature an item. Oh, Christine, you've got your hand up. You're on mute, yeah? Mute, unmute. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Thanks, Carol. Look, I just wanted to quickly say, and the exciting thing about that ICJ decision was the case was brought by young people from the Pacific. It was universities, law students from Vanuatu at University of the South Pacific who initiated that whole thing, and that really excites me.
Oh, it was brilliant. Yeah, how they had the two core effect going. You have to read the updates anyway. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Anyway, this is an example of what's in the art gallery. This is one which I picked on because it was collaboration, and it was entitled Zonta at Antarctica. It was done by Paola Rivaro and our president-elect Fernando Gallo-Freschi from Italy. Every artwork has a little story with it, and this one says that on her 9th expedition at the beginning of 2024, Paola took the Zonta flag with her and had it signed by her team of women from Italy and New Zealand while on her research ship. Then Fernanda collected it, brought it back to the headquarters, showed it at the next international board meeting, and the flag's now at Zonta headquarters. Dr. Rivaro, she's from Zonta Club of Alessandria in Italy. She's a chemical oceanographer, professor at the University of Genova in Italy, researching climate change within the National Research Programme in Antarctica, ROSC, since 1994. And in Italy, she's known as the Lady of the Glaciers. So that's one of our Zontians. Anyway, I thought you'd be interested in that. I hope it inspires you to do a club entry. It's so you don't have to actually draw something. Our September Intercontinental Think Tank will be very special. It's all about plastics, pollution and health. There'll be a panel of 4 speakers, including 2 scientists and 2 Zontians. One of the Zontians will be Joan Kabayambi, who's Zonta International's representative at the United Nations Environment Programme in Nairobi. And by the way, the Director General of the UN office in Nairobi, Zainab Bangura, was interviewed by Lynn Foley as part of the Remarkable Women Powerful Stories series recently. So track that down as well on the Zonta website. Now, the UNEP is currently working on the global plastics treaty, and there's a major round of this negotiations underway in Geneva. This art installation caught my eye. They've just brought all of this in, and some of this was sponsored by the Minderoo Foundation in Australia, and they brought in the statue of the thinker, and they call it the thinker's burden. The thinker cradles a baby and sits atop Mother Earth and is entwined by a giant strand of DNA, the building block of life, to highlight the growing health and environmental impacts of an unregulated plastic industry on both people and the planet. And the plastic at the bottom is slowly going to get higher during the negotiations. So I'm really intrigued to see how that all works out. So keep that one in mind. When it comes to collaboration internationally, this is what's been happening. Zonta International is a member of the Women and Gender Constituency, which is one of the key organisations that can communicate with the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Now, as part of Global Week of Action in September, they highlight 2 activities. The Collective Draw the Line campaign in September. This one's all about stopping fossil fuels, increasing clean energy, taxing polluters, cancelling unfair debt, protecting people who speak out, respecting Indigenous people, and not letting fossil fuel lobbyists have more influence than people. So there's a lot of demonstrations happening around the world around that. And then also they've got this feminist resistance gatherings happening on the 17th of September, where they simultaneously host gatherings, discussions and actions all about climate justice. So they encourage you to find out more and join in if you can. We also work closely with We Can, the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network that recently had that major global assembly, and we were a co-signatory to their call for action. There were 100,000 people a day on that global assembly. And we're also planning to co-present with the Men Engage Alliance at CSW 70 as well. It's in March next year. Did you know that discussions are underway to move the UN FPA, UNICEF and UN Women to Nairobi by 2026? That's because it's getting increasingly hard for them to operate in New York, given the current political situation in the USA. So just thought you'd mention that. We've also got the Share Your Story Festival, the 26th of August. 6 Zonta clubs highlighted, including one from Australia, the Zonta Club on Melbourne on Yarra. Ooh, big thumbs up to them on the Women Taking Climate Action Award. There's also Safe Space, the LAHA update on the 4th of September. Interesting webinar on how AIs are impacting gender equality on the 9th of September. And of course, our own think tank on the 14th of September. So go to the Zonta International website on the events page and see what's coming up. I'll hand over to Bridget for an update on what's going on in Australia. You're on mute. You're on mute. Bridget, you're on mute.
Sorry, I thought I took it off.
Okay.
Thank you. There are a list of things that I'll talk about, but just outside, I suppose, the climate discussion, there's a couple of things that we're doing. One is that Zonta Australia is now working quite closely with, they call it country leaders from a Zonta perspective, and so countries across the world, similar to our Zonta Australia and the US caucus, are now starting to have similar organisations, and I think there's about 13 now around the world, and I think that will be a powerful voice when we need to do advocacy at the national level across the globe, not at the international level into the UN, but if we need to have a voice into each of our individual national governments, that framework is starting to be really quite a solid one now. The other couple of areas we are working closely, Sue and I had a meeting with some representatives of Afghan women to work out how we may do some advocacy on their behalf in the Australian context. They were particularly concerned that there was 20,000 visas allocated for Afghan people to move to Australia, and there's very few of those have been used, and there seems to be quite strong barriers or clogging of the pipelines. I'm not too sure what it is, but they're keen that we advocate on their behalf, so we're doing a bit of work with them. But other than that, we're also looking at, if we move to the next slide, looking at the Climate Action Week in Sydney in March. Bernie, I'm sure you know all about that from a New South Wales perspective. In April of next year, there's the Women Deliver conference, and I sat in on a preliminary discussion about that conference. 5,000 to 6,000 people expected to attend. It's the first time it's been in the Asia Pacific area, and it sounds like it's a fabulous event. I have to say, very slick in the marketing. So, and if you go onto their website, and after that conversation, quite a huge, almost to the point of overwhelming, lot of information. So I think as Zontans, we have to figure out where our place will be in that conference next year. Your good point, Carol, that we don't have to fly anywhere, or except for maybe from domestically to get there, but I think it is a huge opportunity that can't be missed. The next one is around the COP31, which I think we've talked a little bit about already. My understanding is we won't know about Australia's success in that area until probably later in the year, November, December. But fingers crossed we get it. I'm not sure many of us will be able to move over to Turkey to go if it's over there, but Adelaide is very close. And as Fiona said in her presentation, the South Australian government is doing a huge amount of work to prepare to make sure that we're in the best possible shape. I'll probably, with my political hat on, I would say to Zonta members across Australia, keep an eye out for grants in this area, because Australia will want to put its best foot forward. So I suspect there may be a little bit of money lurking about for partnerships in the climate area, as Australia, as a rule, or generally prepares. And so the government, I think, will be providing incentives to communities to make sure that they, as I said, put their best foot forward if we do get COP next year. So encourage your presidents to keep an eye out for possible funding streams, albeit big or small, to create those partnerships and to move our Zonta Says Now agenda forward. Let's move on to our partners across this sector as well. We've got Weller, has a Tools for Changemakers online event on the 12th of August, and I would encourage you to dip into their website. They have a huge amount of research in there that really is very topical for what we're talking about today. The Women's Climate Congress, if you haven't tapped into one of their presentations, I would urge you to do so. They also have an online members book club, which I admit I haven't taken advantage of yet, but I'm sure Carol has. Again, a hugely passionate group of people, but who also come with very strong credentials in this area. And lastly, the Gender and Disaster Australia. For those of you who are not familiar with that, I would urge you to go and have a look at their website, and they are a wealth of information of online courses. Some of them are in person, but generally they're online, and the majority of them are free. So again, something that we have at our fingertips to take advantage of. And I would encourage you in your clubs to actually have this on the agenda, if not every dinner meeting, but at least maybe every quarter, so that it's an area where Zontians can take the opportunity to use these products to either inform themselves or to have an informed debate within their clubs. So thank you.
There's one other thing I wanted to raise with the Climate Council is pushing hard for strong climate targets, and they've just brought out a report and a petition that you can sign as well to support for more ambitious targets.
Perfect. Carol, I'll hand back to you if you want at this point.
Beautiful. Excellent. Well, just a quick other news. I went to the movies the other day and saw Future Council. If you've not seen it, go and see it. It's about 8 young people that take a trip through Europe and challenge corporations about the future. These children, they were chosen out of over 1,000 children, and they just make your heart go. They've set up this global organisation, which they call the Regenerators, and they're all looking at creating advisory groups of children that can inform corporate boards. So it's an interesting one. Did anyone have anything else they wanted to raise? And was there anything else in the chat line, Christine? No, I think we're okay. Yeah, we're okay. Right. Okay. The next thing then is the next meeting, which will be on Saturday, the 11th of October. Our guest speaker will be Charlotte Sterrett, and she has a role with the World Wildlife Fund Australia, where she's working on the absolutely huge Climate Resilient by Nature project that works across many countries in the Indo-Pacific region. So put the date in your diary and note that the clocks will be changing in some states before this meeting, so be sure to check your times. And so I just want to reiterate my thanks today to Fiona for her great presentation. I look forward to working more closely with the National Council of Women Australia, because I'm sure we can do magical things together. And on behalf of my fellow co-presenters and all of you, thank you for making the meeting so interesting. We had lots to think about, and hopefully you can't wait to get started on purposeful collaboration. I'll take my screen off share so as we can all give each other a wave. So until you can take your screen off thingies and we can all see each other and have a wave, and I look forward to seeing you all at the guest meeting. But until then, keep breathing, keep smiling and have fun. See you in October. Bye.
Thanks, Carol. Bye.